The first gunshot split the silence like thunder across the valley. Wyatt Daniels dropped to his knee behind a weather-worn boulder, wincing as his old war wound protested the sudden movement. Three more shots followed, kicking up dust mere inches from his cover. Through the rising cloud, he counted three riders circling his homestead. The Reeves gang's signature red bandanas visible even at this distance. Wyatt's calloused fingers checked his Winchester 73 with practiced precision. 5 bullets remaining. 3 men approaching. One chance to protect everything he'd built. "Come on out, Daniels." Victor Reeves's voice carried across the yard. "That land ain't worth dying for." Wyatt's weathered face hardened as he adjusted his grip on the rifle. 20 years fighting for this country, first in the Union Army, then against every outlaw and element the Wyoming Territory could throw at him, had taught him one truth. Everything worth having was worth dying for. He steadied his breathing and prepared to make his stand. 6 months earlier, Wyatt had stood at a different kind of precipice. The fresh grave of his younger brother Jacob lay before him, a simple wooden cross marking where his last blood relative now rested. The consumption had taken Jacob quickly, leaving Wyatt alone with 200 acres of the most promising land in Eagles Pass and no way to work at all with his battle-damaged leg. Sheriff Mike Calloway approached from behind, boots crunching on the cemetery's dry soil. The tin star on his chest caught the afternoon sun. "I'm sorry, Wyatt. Jacob was a good man." Wyatt nodded, his throat too tight for words. They'd survived Gettysburg together, Mike losing an eye while Wyatt took a Confederate bullet through his thigh. Now, 20 years later, they still stood side by side. "Heard Victor Reeves was asking questions about your water rights yesterday," Mike said, adjusting his hat against the sun. "Vultures circle before the body's cold," Wyatt muttered. "He's buying up half the county. Got some Eastern money behind him, rumors say." Wyatt's jaw tightened. "This land stays in the Daniels family. My father didn't drag us 2,000 miles in a wagon just to have some land grabber take it." Back at his cabin that night, Wyatt penned a letter to a marriage broker in Boston. A man couldn't run a ranch this size alone, not with a leg that seized up in cold weather. He needed a wife, someone practical, resilient. Someone who could help preserve what generations of Daniels men had built. The train whistle pierced the spring air as Wyatt waited on the Eagles Pass platform. His freshly trimmed beard and pressed shirt did little to soften the hard lines of his face or the intensity of his storm-gray eyes. The scar that ran from his right temple to his jaw, a parting gift from a Confederate saber, pulled tight as he scanned the disembarking passengers. When Abigail Morgan finally stepped onto the platform, she looked nothing like the woman he'd expected. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, dirt smudged across her face, and a fierce determination burned in eyes that had clearly seen trouble. She carried a small carpet bag with white knuckles, her gaze darting warily across the platform until it locked with his. "Mr. Daniels," she called, voice stronger than her appearance suggested. Wyatt approached, noting the bruise forming on her forearm and the calculated way she positioned herself, back to the wall, eyes tracking every movement around them. "What happened?" he asked simply, removing his coat and placing it around her shoulders without ceremony. 3 men boarded at the last stop, drunk, grabbing. Her chin lifted slightly. "One of them won't be using his right hand properly for a while." Wyatt raised an eyebrow. "You have a knife?" "Hat pin," she corrected, the ghost of a smile touching her lips. As they rode toward the ranch in his wagon, the silence between them grew heavy with unspoken questions. Finally, Abigail broke it. "Your letters were beautiful, Mr. Daniels. Poetic almost. I didn't expect that from a rancher." Wyatt's hands tightened on the reins. "Those weren't my letters, Miss Morgan." "What?" "My brother Jacob wrote them. He passed last winter." The color drained from Abigail's face. "So I've traveled 2,000 miles to marry a ghost?" "You've traveled to a business arrangement with me," Wyatt corrected, his voice level. Jacob had the words, "I have the land. The choice to stay or go is yours. But I should warn you, those men on the train, they ride for Victor Reeves, and his gang controls the only road back to the station." Abigail's eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Daniels?" "No, ma'am. Just stating facts. Wyoming isn't Boston. Out here, threats don't need to be spoken to be real." The Thunderbolt Ranch spread before them as they crested the final hill. A modest cabin, a sturdy barn, and acres of promising spring grass stretching toward distant mountains. Wyatt pulled the wagon to a stop near the corral. "Not much to look at," he admitted, "but it's the soil that matters." He climbed down, his left leg stiff after the long ride, and retrieved a measuring stick from the wagon bed. Kneeling in a nearby patch of earth, he drove the stick down until only an inch remained visible. 11 inches, he said, a rare note of pride entering his voice. 11 inches of the richest topsoil in the territory. Deep enough to grow anything, hold moisture through summer. Land like this is what men kill for out here. Abigail knelt beside him, studying the black earth with newfound interest. "My father was a gentleman farmer outside Boston. He always said you could read the story of a place in its soil." "Smart man." Wyatt stood, brushing dirt from his hands. "This land tells a story of possibility." A rifle shot cracked in the distance, sending birds scattering from a nearby cottonwood. Wyatt's hand moved instantly to the Colt at his hip. "Hunting season's over," he muttered. "Let me show you something else." Inside the cabin, he retrieved his Winchester rifle from its place above the hearth. With deft movements, he broke it open, checked the action, and handed it to Abigail. Model of 73, 17-inch octagonal barrel, 10 rounds. They call it the gun that won the West. His eyes met hers. Every woman in Wyoming territory should know how to use one. To his surprise, Abigail handled the weapon with unexpected familiarity. "My husband taught me to shoot before he died," she explained, seeing his expression. "Said a widow with property needed protection." "Wise man," Wyatt nodded, "though I'm sorry for your loss." "Don't be," she replied coldly. "Some losses are a liberation." Before Wyatt could respond, hoofbeats approached outside. He took the Winchester back, moving to the window with the fluid motion of a man accustomed to trouble. "Reeves," he muttered, "and his boy Billy." Two riders approached the cabin, the older one sporting a silver-trimmed black hat that likely cost more than most men made in a month. Victor Reeves dismounted with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent a lifetime in the saddle. His son Billy, a wiry young man with cruel eyes, remained mounted, hand resting near his holstered revolver. "Afternoon, Daniels," Victor called, all friendly smiles and hard eyes. "Thought I'd pay my respects, seeing as how I missed poor Jacob's funeral." "Say your piece and move on, Reeves," Wyatt responded, standing in the doorway, rifle held casually but ready. Victor's gaze shifted to Abigail, who had appeared behind Wyatt. "Well now, what have we here? Didn't know you were expecting company." Billy Reeves leaned forward in his saddle, eyes narrowing. "Say, ain't she the one from the train? The one who—" "State your business," Wyatt interrupted sharply. Victor's smile never wavered. "Just being neighborly and making an offer. $5 an acre for this whole spread. Generous considering." "Considering what?" "Considering your water situation." Victor gestured toward the creek that ran along the property's edge. "Jacob signed over water rights to me last fall. Needed cash for doctors, I reckon. Come summer, that creek belongs to me." Wyatt's face remained impassive, but his trigger finger twitched. "Get off my land." "Think on it. Daniels, a man with a bad leg can't work a ranch this size alone." Victor turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and miss, careful who you stick with that hat pin of yours. Some men don't take kindly to being pricked." After they'd ridden away, Abigail turned to Wyatt. Those are the men from the train. Figured as much. Wyatt watched the riders until they disappeared beyond the ridge. Reeves wants this land, and he won't stop until he gets it, or until someone puts him in the ground. Why haven't you? There was no judgment in Abigail's question, only calculation. Law still means something here, for now. Wyatt turned to face her. You should go back east, Miss Morgan. This isn't what you signed up for. Abigail's chin lifted. I didn't run from bullies in Boston, Mr. Daniels. I won't start in Wyoming. Before Wyatt could respond, Sheriff Calloway's horse appeared on the road. The lawman's expression was grim as he approached. Wyatt, we've got trouble. Reeves filed papers in town today. Claims he owns your entire property, not just the water rights. Has a bill of sale with Jacob's signature on it. Wyatt's face darkened like a thundercloud. That's impossible. Judge Harmon's reviewing it tomorrow. Mike handed over a folded document. You've been served. Abigail watched as Wyatt's world shifted beneath his feet. In that moment, she made her decision. Mr. Daniels, she said firmly, I believe I'll be staying after all. It seems you could use an ally. The weeks that followed saw Abigail adapting to ranch life with surprising aptitude. She learned to mend fences, tend livestock, and keep the household running while Wyatt focused on preparing for the coming drought. Each evening, he taught her more about survival in the unforgiving landscape, how to track, shoot, and navigate by stars. One afternoon, Caleb Johnson, a freedman who farmed neighboring land, arrived with fresh vegetables and news. Reeves' men been riding boundaries, he reported, his dark eyes serious beneath the brim of his worn hat. Telling folks they'll be cutting off water to anyone who don't sell by month's end. Wyatt nodded grimly. You standing your ground? Till they put me under it, Caleb confirmed. His gaze shifted to Abigail. Ma'am, you might want to be careful in town. Overheard Billy Reeves asking questions about you. Man seems fixated. That night, while searching for coffee in Abigail's cupboard, Wyatt discovered a pearl-handled derringer hidden beneath folded linens. When confronted, Abigail's composure cracked for the first time. I'm not who you think I am, Mr. Daniels. Her hands trembled slightly. My real name is Abigail Sullivan. My husband was a federal judge in Boston. He was murdered, shot in his study, and I was framed for it. Wyatt studied her face, looking for deception and finding only pain. The man who killed him was his business partner, Richard Hammond. They were embezzling from the railroad. I discovered it, threatened to expose them. A week later, James was dead, and Hammond had witnesses claiming they saw me pull the trigger. Her eyes met Wyatt's. I ran west, changed my name. The marriage advertisement seemed providential. And the derringer? Insurance. There's a $500 bounty on my head. Wyatt was silent for a long moment. We all have pasts out here, Miss Sullivan. The West forgives much if you're strong enough to forge a future. May turned to June, and the promised drought arrived with merciless precision. The creek slowed to a trickle, then stopped altogether when Reeves' men built a dam upstream. Crops withered in the fields. Livestock grew gaunt. Each day, Wyatt rode the perimeter, watching helplessly as the land he loved slowly died of thirst. While cleaning Jacob's old trunk, Abigail discovered a hidden compartment containing a leather-bound journal. Inside were meticulous notes and crude maps, detailing Jacob's discovery of silver ore beneath the northwestern corner of the property. He knew, Abigail breathed, showing Wyatt the journal. This is why Reeves wants the land so badly. Caleb, who had become a regular visitor and ally, examined the journal with widening eyes. I saw Billy Reeves beating on your brother about 2 weeks before he took sick. Thought it was just Billy being Billy, but maybe... Wyatt's face turned to granite. We need proof those sale documents are forged, and I know where to find it. Under cover of darkness, Wyatt and Abigail crept toward the Reeves compound on the edge of town. Using skills honed during the war, Wyatt picked the lock on the office door while Abigail kept watch. Inside, they rifled through ledgers and correspondence until Abigail gasped, holding up a letter. "It's from Boston," she whispered. "From Richard Hammond to Victor Reeves." Before they could read further, a floorboard creaked in the outer room. Wyatt drew his Colt as the door burst open, revealing two of Reeves's men. Gunfire erupted in the confined space. Wyatt took a bullet to the shoulder, but managed to drop one assailant. To his amazement, Abigail fired with deadly accuracy, hitting the second man in the chest. "Run!" Wyatt commanded, clutching his bleeding shoulder as they fled into the night. By morning, Sheriff Calloway arrived at the ranch with grim news. "You're wanted for breaking and entering, theft and attempted murder, Wyatt. Both of you. I've got to take you in." "Those charges are horse shit, Mike, and you know it." "Maybe so, but my badge means I follow the law." Mike's single eye betrayed his conflict. "Judge Harmon's in Reeves's pocket. You won't get a fair trial." "Then we won't stand trial," Wyatt decided, grabbing essential supplies. "We're heading for the Canyon hideout." With Sheriff Calloway deliberately looking the other way, Wyatt and Abigail escaped to a remote box canyon where Wyatt had once hidden Union gold during the war. There they found Blue Hawk, a Shoshone scout who had served with Wyatt's regiment, waiting with fresh horses. "Old enemies return like bad pennies," Blue Hawk observed, treating Wyatt's wound with practiced hands. Within days, Caleb arrived with 5 other small ranchers, all victims of Reeves's water manipulation. They formed an unlikely alliance, planning to expose the corruption that threatened to steal their land and livelihoods. Their strategy session was interrupted by a stranger riding into camp, a lean man with a U.S. Marshal's badge and cold, assessing eyes. "Marshal Grant," he introduced himself, dismounting smoothly. "Looking for Abigail Sullivan, wanted for the murder of Judge James Sullivan in Boston." Wyatt stepped between them. "You've got the wrong woman." Grant's thin smile never reached his eyes. Distinctive scar on her left wrist, blue eyes, expert with a derringer. "That's her." Abigail stepped forward. "I didn't kill my husband." "Convenient claim, ma'am." Grant produced wanted posters with Abigail's face. "I've tracked you across 5 states." Wyatt's rifle remained trained on the lawman. "You got proof beyond a poster?" "Richard Hammond's testimony, pillar of Boston society." Wyatt and Abigail exchanged glances. "Marshal," Wyatt said carefully, "what if I told you Hammond is connected to Victor Reeves, that they're running land fraud schemes across the territory?" Grant's expression shifted minutely. "I'd say that's a convenient story." Abigail retrieved the letter they'd stolen. "Read it yourself. Hammond instructs Reeves on forging documents, mentions my husband's murder as our unfortunate necessity." Grant studied the letter for a long moment. "Been tracking Hammond for 3 years," he finally admitted. "Railroad fraud, land swindles. Never could make anything stick." His eyes narrowed. "You're saying they're partners?" "Partners in murder," Abigail confirmed. "Mine was to be next, until I ran." The unlikely alliance grew by one as Marshal Grant revealed he'd been investigating land fraud across multiple territories. The evidence from Reeves's office provided the missing link to a conspiracy stretching from Boston to Wyoming. "Hammond arrives next week," Grant informed them. "Coming to inspect his investment personally." Wyatt's tactical mind immediately began formulating a plan. "Then we'll be ready." They prepared meticulously. Blue Hawk scouted the trails Hammond would travel. Caleb and the other ranchers positioned themselves at strategic points. Wyatt, his shoulder still tender, cleaned his Winchester with the focus of a man preparing for his final battle. 11 inches, he told Abigail that night, checking the rifle's sight. "That's how deep a Winchester round can penetrate pine at 100 yards, enough to punch through a carriage door." "And is that justice?" she asked softly. More death? Wyatt's weathered face softened momentarily. Justice is whatever keeps good people alive and free, Abigail. Sometimes that's a bullet. Sometimes it's just the willingness to fire one. Hammond's carriage arrived with a full Reeves escort. The ambush was sprung at Devil's Narrows, where the road passed through a tight canyon. Gunfire erupted from multiple positions, causing panic among the Reeves men. Marshal Grant targeted the outriders while Wyatt focused on disabling the carriage. What they hadn't anticipated was Victor Reeves himself riding alongside, or Sheriff Calloway being held hostage inside the carriage. When the shooting stopped, Wyatt found himself face to face with Victor, who held a gun to the sheriff's head. "Drop it, Daniels!" Victor shouted, "or your one-eyed friend loses his other eye." Wyatt lowered his Winchester, mind racing for options. Hammond emerged from the carriage, his Boston finery incongruous against the dusty landscape. "Mr. Daniels," Hammond smiled coldly, "I've heard so much about you, the thorn in my associate's side." "You killed Judge Sullivan," Wyatt stated flatly. "Framed his wife. All for what? Land? For empire, Mr. Daniels. The future belongs to men with vision, and the nerve to seize opportunity." "Vision?" Wyatt laughed bitterly. "You're just another thief in an expensive hat." Victor pressed his gun harder against Mike's temple. "Enough talk. You're finished, Daniels." A shot cracked through the canyon, not from Wyatt's position, but from a ridge above. Billy Reeves, who had been covering his father, tumbled from his horse. In the momentary confusion, Wyatt dove for his rifle as Abigail emerged from cover. Derringer aimed steadily. "Drop it, Victor," she commanded. More gunfire erupted as the ranchers in Blue Hawk closed in. Hammond attempted to flee but ran directly into Marshal Grant's waiting arms. Victor, seeing his plans collapsing, made one desperate lunge toward Wyatt. The Winchester roared once, and Victor Reeves fell, a look of genuine surprise crossing his face before the light left his eyes. "You killed my brother," Wyatt said quietly to the dead man. "The consumption might have taken him, but you put him in that grave." In the aftermath, Hammond confessed to orchestrating Judge Sullivan's murder and framing Abigail. The documents proving Jacob had sold the ranch were revealed as forgeries. Water rights were restored to all affected properties. 1 month later, rain finally came to Eagles Pass, a driving deluge that turned the parched earth to mud and filled the creek to overflowing. Wyatt stood on his porch, watching the life-giving water soak into his 11 inches of precious soil. Abigail joined him, her legal name restored and her freedom secured by Marshal Grant's testimony. "What will you do now?" she asked. Wyatt gazed across his reviving land. "Same thing Daniel's men have done for 3 generations. Work this soil, raise cattle, build something worth leaving behind." He turned to face her. "The question is, what will you do?" Boston would welcome back the vindicated widow of Judge Sullivan. Abigail's hand found his. "I think I've found something here worth staying for." Wyatt presented her with a new Colt Frontier revolver, polished walnut grip gleaming in the sun. 11 inches of barrel and justice, he said with the hint of a smile, deep enough to bury the past and start again. As they rode out to inspect the renewed pastures, rifles secure in their saddle scabbards, Wyatt Daniels felt something he hadn't experienced since before the war. Hope. In this hard land where men measured worth in acres and water rights, he'd found something more valuable. A partner who understood that sometimes 11 inches of good soil and the determination to defend it was all the foundation needed to build a future. Sometimes it takes a bullet to achieve justice and 11 inches of soil to build a future. In the Wild West, men were measured not by their words, but by their actions and their resilience in the face of adversity. And speaking of adversity, the story of Wyatt's confrontation with the Wells Fargo gang must wait for another time.